Charity employees have traditionally received low wages for what's often extremely challenging work. Now, more than 300 charities operating in Queensland are facing a substantial wage increase, but the organisations don't know how they'll pay for it. The state government has already committed hundreds of millions of dollars, but that won't cover the extra costs. And the federal government says it's not planning on pitching in. Some charities are warning that without more financial assistance, they'll have to cut back services or shut down, as Siobhan Barry reports.
At 90 years old, Jem Fitzgerald has no immediate family left.
So I'm all alone, no mother, no father, no sisters, no brothers.
Tasks that used to be simple are now much more difficult. But Jem Fitzgerald's still living alone in this Brisbane retirement village, thanks to the help she gets from the Red Cross and Meals on Wheels.
I don't have to have help in any other way, and I try to keep myself like that so that I can be a certain amount of independence, you know, because I'm used to looking after other people, and I think, well, why can't I look after myself? Hello? Hello, Megan. How are you?
Every morning, someone from the Red Cross calls for a quick chat and to check she's okay.
Well, it's wonderful because, you know, if you didn't get phone calls and somebody to talk to now and again, I mean, I'd go dumb, wouldn't I? I wouldn't be able to talk if I didn't have any practice.
Every day, the Red Cross provides this service to 450 Queenslanders living on their own. But the future of this service and several others they provide is now on shaky ground. Workers in the community services or charity sector have historically received low wages.
There's a number of reasons for it. It's also considered that because it was a predominantly female workforce, that it would be considered that this is a voluntary or a female-related work.
Unions, governments and the sector all agree that Queensland's charity workers need a substantial pay rise. But the question is, who should foot the bill, and can it be done without hurting the charities and those who rely on them? 2 years ago, the Queensland Industrial Relations Commission awarded an average 24% pay rise to charity workers covered by the state award. The Queensland government was in the process of transferring some industrial relations powers to the federal government. The Commonwealth agreed to introduce a regulation to pass on the pay rise to some charity workers covered by the federal award who would otherwise have missed out.
We agreed as a state government that they ought to be covered by the same sorts of wages and rates of pay and conditions. So the federal government then negotiated with the Australian Services Union a heads of agreement, so it essentially became a process between the union and the federal government.
Well, it was a request from the Queensland government to deal with the transition to those people moving on to federal awards. They asked us to make sure that those workers were paid the higher rates as a result of the equal pay decision in Queensland, and we agreed that at no cost to the Commonwealth we'd make that transition happen.
But the federal government didn't announce the regulation until August this year, a delay of nearly 20 months.
This had been sitting with the federal government for a long period of time. No one was anticipating that when the regulation was announced that it would go back for such a period of time.
Well, as I understand it, I mean, there was discussion among the parties. People knew the regulation was to be made.
In 2009, the Queensland government announced an extra $414 million over 4 years to help pay for the wage increases. And it's promised $125 million a year in recurrent funding after that. But the sector says the wage rises will cost much more.
So that left a gap of about $260 million potentially, and these are some rough figures.
Look, it's never going to be enough. No money is ever enough to meet all the needs we have in our community, our service needs as well as needs for wages for our workers.
The Red Cross estimates it was facing up to $8 million in extra costs in the first year alone. It says it's received about $300,000 a year in extra funding from the state government.
Look, it was a pretty scary scenario. We were looking in Queensland of contraction of our workforce about 15 to 20%. I think you'd understand that if your costs go up by 25% overnight, and your revenue doesn't, there's going to be a crunch.
We were just asked to make the regulation, and so I'm not aware of the level of funding they received, what the basis of that was, what the understandings were. But in order to facilitate a discussion about those issues and to try and resolve and come to some understandings, I've agreed to delay the regulation.
The sector is now in limbo as it awaits the final decision.
We've got no customers we can pass costs on to, we've got no profit margins to squeeze, and what we really need is both the state and the federal government to come together to, I think, firstly fully fund their contracted services, and then I think provide some adjustment funding, as you see with the steel industry at the moment, the manufacturing industry.
The state government says its funding has gone to where it's needed most.
The priority was to provide the bulk of that funding to services that provide acute care to clients, overnight services, respite services, the disability services. So most of those services got 100% supplementation.
Karen Struthers says other organisations will have to look at ways to cut costs, but she says the state government is providing help for charities to adjust.
We've been working with our federal colleagues to stump up as well. They fund some of these services, and we've certainly asked them to contribute what they can.
Well, I think there's 2 points to make there. Firstly, the agreement with the Queensland Government was that it would be at no cost to the Commonwealth. And the second is that the Commonwealth doesn't employ anyone. We contract for services.
Chris Evans says the workers will get their pay rise, but what remains to be seen is how it will be funded. The Red Cross warns it's not just the future of the charities that's at stake, but also the future of those they help.
It would be very hard for me if I didn't have help of some sort like that. Yeah.
Siobhan Barry reporting there.